Hello and welcome back. Today is Sunday, November 24th, 2024, and we are reading chapter 18 of Lirael by Garth Nix. I am getting started a little later than usual today because I have been making paper and doing my language learning software and just getting stuff done. It has been a beautiful sunny autumn day. My face is all shiny because I'm very dry from this weather. Been putting lots of lotion on, so sorry for my glow. But anyways, yesterday we left off with poor Nicholas meeting the necromancer and being implanted with something. I don't know if he has some sort of magical GPS in his hand or what. I cannot remember what this thing does, but I think we're gonna figure out what has happened to poor Sam today. So let's get right into it. Chapter 8. Oh, wait. I need to drink a tea before we start. Okay, now let's get started. Chapter 18. A Father's Healing Hand. The hospital in Bain was relatively new, built 6 years before, when a flurry of hospital reform came sweeping up from the south. Even in only 6 years, many people had died there, and it was close enough to the wall for Sam's sense of death to remain active. Weakened by pain and by the morphine they were giving him for it, Sam was unable to drive away his sense of death. Always it loomed close, filling his bones with its bitter chill, making him shiver constantly, and the doctors increase his medication. He dreamed of bodiless creatures that would come from death and finish off what the necromancer had begun, and he could not wake himself from the dreams. When he did wake, he often saw that same necromancer stalking towards him, and would scream and scream until the nurse, who it really was, gave him another injection and started the cycle of nightmares again. Sam suffered 4 days of this, drifting in and out of consciousness, without ever really waking up, and never losing his sense of death and the fear that accompanied it. Sometimes he was lucid enough to realize that Nick was there too, in the next bed, his hands bandaged. Sometimes they talked briefly, but it wasn't ever a real conversation, since Sam could neither answer questions nor continue whatever talk Nick began. On the 5th day, everything changed. Sam was once again in the grip of a nightmare, once again in death, facing a necromancer who was many things all at once, simultaneously in, under, and above the water. Sam was running and falling and drowning, as had actually happened, and then came the grip on his wrist. But this time, it wasn't on his wrist. It was on his shoulder, and it was cool and comforting. A grip that somehow led him out of the nightmare, lifting him up through a sky that was all charter marks and sunshine. When Sam opened his eyes, he could see clearly for the first time, his vision clear of the drug haze and vertigo. He felt fingers resting lightly on his neck, on the pulse there, and he knew his father's hand before he even looked up. Touchstone was right next to him. His eyes closed as he directed a healing spell into his son's body, the marks flashing under his fingers as they left him and entered Sam. Sam looked up at Touchstone, grateful that his father's eyes were closed, and he couldn't see the pathetic relief on his son's face, or the tears that he hastened to brush away. The charter magic was making him warm for the first time in days. Sam could feel the marks driving the drugs out of his bloodstream, while they took over quelling the pain from his burns. But it was the mere presence of his father that had driven away the fear of death. He could still sense death, but it was dim and far away, and he was no longer afraid. King Touchstone I finished the spell and opened his eyes. They were gray, like his son's, but Touchstone's were the more troubled now, and he was obviously tired. Slowly, he took his hand away from Sam's neck. They almost hugged until Sam saw that there were 2 doctors, 4 of Touchstone's guards, and 2 Ancelstian army officers in the ward, as well as a whole crowd of Ancelstian police, soldiers, and officials gathered out in the corridor, peering in. So Sam and Touchstone gripped one another's forearms instead, Sam sitting up in the bed. Only the tightness of Sam's grip and his reluctance to let go indicated just how glad he was to see his father. Both doctors were amazed that Sam was even conscious, and one checked the chart at the foot of the bed to affirm that the patient really had been receiving intravenous morphine for days. "Really, this is impossible," the doctor began, till a cold glance from one of Touchstone's guards convinced him that his conversation was currently not required. A slight further movement convinced him that his presence was not required either, and he backed away to the door. Like the king, the guards were all wearing three-piece suits of sober charcoal gray, so as not to alarm delicate Ancestieran sensibilities. This effect was only slightly spoiled by the fact that they also carried swords, badly disguised in rolled-up trench coats. "The entourage," said Touchstone dryly, seeing Sam look out at all the people in the corridor. "I told them I was simply here as a private individual to see my son, but apparently even that requires an official escort. I hope you're feeling up to riding. If we stay here any longer, I'll be cornered by some sort of committee or politician for sure." "Riding?" asked Sam. He had to say it twice, his throat initially too weak to get the word out. "I'm to leave school before the end of term?" "Yes," said Touchstone, keeping his voice low. "I want you home. Ancestier is no longer a safe haven. The police here caught your bus driver. He was bribed, and bribed with Old Kingdom silver deniers, so one of our enemies has found a way to work on both sides of the wall, or has at least found out how to spend money in Ancestier." "I think I'm well enough to ride," said Sam, wrinkling his brow. "I mean, I don't know whether I'm really hurt. My wrist is sore." He paused and looked at the bandage on his wrist. Charter marks still moved around the edge of the bandage, oozing out of his pores like golden sweat. Healing him, Sam realized, for his wrist really was only sore, where it had been excruciatingly painful before, and the pain from the lesser burns on his thighs and ankles was completely gone. "The bandage can come off now," said Touchstone, and he began to untie it. As he unwound it, he lowered his head still closer to Sam and whispered, "You've not been badly hurt in body, Sam, but I feel that you have suffered an injury of the spirit. That will take time to heal, for it's beyond my power to repair." "What do you mean?" asked Sam anxiously. He felt very young all of a sudden, not at all like the nearly adult prince he was supposed to be. "Can't Mother fix it up?" "I don't think so," said Touchstone, resting his hand on Sam's shoulder. The small white scars from years of sword practice and actual fighting bright across his knuckles in the hospital light. "But then I cannot tell the nature of it, only that it has happened. I would guess that, as a result of your going into death unprepared and unprotected, some small fragment of your spirit has been leached away. Not much, but enough to make you feel weaker or slower, basically less than yourself. But it will come back, in time." "I shouldn't have done it, should I?" whispered Sam, looking up into his father's face, searching for some sternness or sign of disapproval. "Is Mother furious with me?" "Not at all," said Touchstone, surprised. "You did what you thought was necessary to save the others, which was both brave and in the best traditions of both sides of the family. Your mother's more worried about you than anything else." "Then where is she?" asked Sam, before he could stop himself. It was a petulant question, and as soon as his mouth closed, he wished he hadn't said it. "Apparently, there's a Mordeaux riding the ferryman at Oldman," explained Touchstone patiently, as he had explained so many of Sabriel's necessary absences over the course of Sam's childhood. "We received word of it as we reached the wall. She took the paper wing and flew off to deal with it. She'll meet us back at Belissaire." "If she doesn't have to go somewhere else," said Sam, knowing he was being bitter and childish. But he could have died, and apparently that still wasn't enough for his mother to come and see him. "Unless she has to go somewhere else," agreed Touchstone, as calmly as ever. His father worked hard at staying calm, Sam knew, for there was the old berserker blood in him, and Touchstone feared its rise. The only time Sam had ever seen that fury was when a false ambassador from one of the northern clans had tried to stab Sabriel with a serving fork at a formal dinner in the palace. Touchstone, roaring like some sort of terrible beast, had picked up the 6-foot barbarian and hurled him the length of the table onto a roast swan. This had scared everyone much more than the assassination attempt, particularly when Touchstone then tried to pick up the double throne and throw that after the man. Fortunately, he'd failed, and was eventually calmed by Sabriel, stroking his brow, as he blindly wrenched at the marble footing of the throne. Sam remembered this as he saw his father's eyelids close just a fraction, and a line appear on his forehead. "Sorry," Sam mumbled. "I know she has to do it, being that porcelain and everything." "Yes," said Touchstone, and Sam got a slight hint of his father's own deep feelings about the many and frequent absences required by Sabriel's battles with the dead. "I'd better get dressed, then," said Sam, and he swung his legs out of the bed. Only then did he notice that the opposite bed was empty and made up. "Where's Nick?" he asked. "He was there, wasn't he? Or did I just dream that?" "I don't know," said Touchstone, who had met his son's friend on previous visits to Ancelstier. "He wasn't here when we arrived. Doctor, was Nicholas Sayer in his bed?" The doctor hurried forward. He didn't know who this strange but obviously important visitor was, or who the patient was either, since the army had insisted on secrecy and the use of first names only. Now he wished that he hadn't heard the other patient's surname, since the name Sayer was not unknown to him. But the chief minister didn't have a son of that age, so the fellow could only have been a cousin or something, which was some relief. "The patient, Nicholas X," he said, emphasizing the X, "was released to one of his parents' confidential servants yesterday. He only had minor shock and some abrasions." "Did he leave a message?" asked Sam, surprised that his friend wouldn't have tried to communicate in some way. "I don't believe so," the doctor started to say, when he was interrupted by a nurse who pushed her way through the massed ranks of blue, khaki, and gray in the corridor. She was quite young and pretty, with striking red hair, not very well concealed under her starched cap. "He left a letter, Your Highness," she said, with the characteristic accent of the North. Obviously a native of Bane, she knew exactly who both Sam and Touchstone were, much to the doctor's annoyance. The doctor took the letter in her outstretched hand, with a sniff, and handed it to Sam, who immediately tore it open. He didn't recognize the handwriting at first. Then he realized that it was Nick's, only the individual letters were much larger and the flourishes less regular. It took a moment for him to work out that this must be a consequence of Nick's writing with heavily bandaged hands. "Dear Sam, I hope you are soon well enough to read this. I seem to be quite recovered myself, though I admit that the events of our unusual evening are somewhat hazy. I guess you wouldn't know that I took it in my head to chase down the necromancer fellow you went after at first, wherever it was you went. Unfortunately, with that dark and the rain, and perhaps a little too much zing in my step, all I managed to do was fall into the sunken road and knock myself out. I was lucky not to break any bones, the doctors say, though I have some interesting bruises. I don't expect that the Debs back in Corvir will be as prepared to look at them as Nurse Moulin, though. I understand that the army got hold of your pater, and he's coming down to take you home, so you won't be finishing the term. I dare say I won't bother either, since I already have my place at Sunbeer. It won't be the same without you, or poor Harry Binlett, or even Cochrane. They found him 5 miles away the next morning, apparently gibbering and frothing, and I expect he's locked up in Smithwin's special hospital by now. Should have been done years ago, of course. In fact, I was thinking that I might come and visit you in your mysterious old kingdom before I have to go up to college next spring. I admit that my scientific interest has been piqued by those apparently animated corpses and your own exhibition of whatever it was. I'm sure you think of it as magic, but I expect it can all be explained by the proper application of scientific method. I hope I can be the one to do so, of course. Sayer's theory of surreality, or Sayer's law of magical explication. It's very boring in hospital, particularly if your ward mate can't carry a conversation, so you'll have to excuse me rambling on. Where was I? Oh yes, experiments in the Old Kingdom. I expect the reason no one has done the proper scientific work before is due to the army. Would you believe that no less than a colonel and 2 captains were here yesterday? wanting me to sign the Official Secrets Act and a declaration that I wouldn't ever speak or write of the recent odd events near the perimeter. They forgot sign language, so I expect I shall inform a deaf journalist when I get back. I won't, of course. At least not until I have something better to tell the world. Some truly great discovery. The officers wanted you to sign as well, but since you weren't in a signing mood, they just waited and got cross with each other. Then I told them that you weren't even a citizen of Excelsior, and they got thoughtful and had a big discussion outside with the lieutenant in charge of the guards. Something tells me the right hand knoweth not what the left hand doeth, since they were from Corvier Legal Affairs, and the guards outside are from the Perimeter Scouts. I was interested to note that the latter belonged to your particular religion, with the caste mark or whatever it is on their foreheads. Not that sociology is really in my field of interest, I hastened to add. I must go now. The aged parents have sent some sort of private undersecretary to the oversecretary chamberlain of the personal privy type of fellow to collect me and take me home to Amburn Court. Apparently, Father is too busy with the Sutherland refugee problem, questions in the house, and all that sort of thing. And Uncle Edward needs his support, blah, 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 as per usual. Mother probably had a charity dinner or something equally all-engrossing. I'll write soon so we can arrange my visit. I expect I'll have everything prepared in a couple of months, 3 at the outside. Chin up! Nick, the mysterious patient X. Sam folded the letter, smiling. At least Nick had come out of that awful night without any real harm, and with his sense of humor intact. It was typical of him that the dead had only triggered his scientific interest, rather than a much more sensible fear. All well? Asked Touchstone, who had been waiting patiently. At least half the onlookers had lost interest, Sam saw, withdrawing farther down the corridor and out of sight, where they felt they could talk. Father, said Sam, did you bring me some clothes? My school stuff must have been ruined. Demed, the bag, please, said Touchstone. Everybody else, outside if you don't mind. Like 2 flocks of sheep that have difficulty mixing, the people left in the ward tried to get out while the people in the corridor tried to help and actually made it more difficult. Eventually, they did all get out, except for Demed, Touchstone's principal bodyguard, a small, thin man who moved alarmingly fast. Demed handed over a compact suitcase before he left, shutting the door. There were Excelsior clothes in the bag, procured, like Touchstone's and the guards, from the Bane consulate of the Old Kingdom. Wear these for now, said Touchstone. We'll get changed at the perimeter, back into sensible clothes. Armored coat and helmet, boots and sword, said Samuth, pulling his hospital gown over his head. Yes, said Touchstone. He hesitated, then said, Does that bother you? I suppose you could go south instead. I must return to the kingdom, but you might be safe in Corvier. No, Sam said. He wanted to stay with his father. He wanted the heavy weight of his armored coat and the pommel of a sword under his palm. But most of all, he wanted to be with his mother in Belissaire, because only then would he really be safe from death. And the necromancer, who he was sure even now waited in that cold river, waiting for Sam to return. And that's the end of chapter 18. So, he's okay. His dad's got him, and hopefully he's going to get his mom. So, I will post chapter 19 tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope you enjoyed that reading. I enjoyed reading it. And if you did, I would love it if you would like, comment, and subscribe. So, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. I don't know what I'm going to do tonight. I might make some more paper. I don't know. But I hope you do something fun. Eat something good. Stay warm. It's probably getting dark now, but go outside if you haven't been outside today. It's a nice day. At least it is here. And hopefully it will be tomorrow as well. So, again, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. And until tomorrow, take care. And as always, may your magic manifest. Bye.